You know that specific kind of silence that falls over a crowd when someone tells a lie so big, so audacious, that the universe seems to pause just to see if lightning will strike. I was standing in that silence. The spotlight was blinding, cutting through the darkness of the grand hall, but it wasn't pointed at me. It was pointed at my stepmother, Elena. She stood there, clutching the Golden Petal Award, the highest honor in the botanical world, looking like a queen in her emerald silk gown. I was in the shadows, stage left, wearing the black utility fatigues I wore every single day. The dirt was still under my fingernails. The smell of peat moss and fertilizer was clinging to my skin, a sharp contrast to the heavy perfume wafting off the crowd of socialites and investors sitting in the velvet seats below. Elena leaned into the microphone. Her voice was smooth, like honey mixed with glass. She told them that this hybrid, the Midnight Crimson Rose, was the work of her life. She told them she had spent 10 years crossbreeding, toiling in the greenhouse, bleeding for this creation that was about to be sold to a global luxury conglomerate for $40 million. Then she looked at me. For a second, I thought she might actually acknowledge me. I thought, maybe, just maybe, the woman who had raised me since I was 7 would finally say my name. Instead, she laughed, a light tinkling sound that echoed through the speakers. She pointed a manicured finger at the shadows where I stood. She told the audience that she wanted to thank her assistant, Clara, for keeping the floors clean and the watering cans full. She said it is so hard to find good help these days, especially help that knows their place. The audience chuckled. A polite ripple of laughter that felt like a physical blow to my gut. I felt the heat rise up my neck. It wasn't just the insult. It was the erasure. Every single Midnight Crimson Rose in that display behind her had been grafted by my hands. The genetic sequence that gave them that impossible, velvet black hue wasn't hers. It was a formula my biological mother had left in a notebook before she died. A notebook I had memorized, refined, and perfected while Elena was busy attending galas and lunching with investors. Elena continued speaking. She announced that the sale of the company, the Gilded Stem, would be finalized tonight, right here on this stage, signing over the rights to the Midnight Crimson to the conglomerate. She looked at me again, her eyes cold and dead serious, and mouthed the words "get out." I didn't move. I reached into the deep pocket of my cargo pants. My hand brushed against the cool metal of a USB drive and a folded piece of parchment paper that was older than I was. You see, Elena made a critical mistake. It is the same mistake every arrogance-blinded person makes. She assumed that because I was quiet, I was stupid. She assumed that because I liked the dirt, I didn't understand the law. She forgot that a garden doesn't just grow up. It grows down. It has roots. And if you don't know where the roots end, you have no idea what you are actually standing on. I walked out onto the stage. The stage manager hissed at me to stop. The murmur in the crowd grew confused. Elena's smile faltered. She covered the microphone with her hand and hissed at me to get back in the wings before she had security drag me out. I walked right past her. I walked to the podium, to the laptop that was projecting the company logo onto the massive screen behind us. Elena grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my bicep. She whispered that I was embarrassing myself, that I was ruining her moment. I pulled my arm away. It wasn't a violent shove, just a firm, undeniable removal of her influence. I plugged the USB drive into the laptop. I looked out at the sea of faces. 400 of the wealthiest, most influential people in the city. The CEO of the conglomerate, Mr. Sterling, was sitting in the front row, a pen in his hand, ready to sign the check that would make Elena rich and erase my mother's legacy forever. I leaned into the microphone. The feedback whine made everyone wince. I told them I had a correction to make. Elena tried to signal the sound booth to cut my mic, but the technician was confused, watching the drama unfold. I told them that the Gilded Stem was indeed for sale. I told them that Elena did indeed own the building, the trucks, and the retail store. But she did not own the rose. The screen behind me flickered. The logo of the Gilded Stem vanished. In its place appeared a scanned document. It was yellowed, typed on an old typewriter, stamped with the official seal of the Department of Agriculture and the Patent Office from 25 years ago. It was a genetic patent. A biological copyright. I pointed to the screen. I explained that the Midnight Crimson was not a new creation. It was a dormant variant registered by my mother, Sarah Vance, 2 decades ago. And the patent had a specific clause. A legacy clause. The room went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I read the clause aloud. It stated that the proprietary genetic rights to this specific botanical strain belonged solely to the bloodline of Sarah Vance. It stated that any commercial reproduction without the direct written consent of the heir was a federal violation of intellectual property. Elena's face went the color of the ashes I used for fertilizer. She stepped back, her heel catching on the hem of her dress. She looked at the screen, then at Mr. Sterling. Sterling wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his team of lawyers in the second row. One of the lawyers was frantically typing on a tablet. After a few agonizing seconds, the lawyer looked up at Sterling and nodded. The document was real. I looked at Elena. I spoke into the mic again, my voice steady, devoid of the shaking I felt in my knees. I told her that she had spent 10 years selling a flower she didn't own. I told her that every single dollar she had made from the Midnight Crimson pre-orders was technically theft. And I told her that the $40 million contract she was about to sign was for a company that was effectively selling stolen goods. Elena screamed. It wasn't a word, just a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She lunged for the laptop, trying to close it, as if shutting the lid would make the truth disappear. But the image remained on the massive screen behind us. She turned to the crowd, her composure shattering like a dropped vase. She told them I was lying. She told them I had forged it. She told them I was a jealous, ungrateful child who she had fed and clothed. She looked at Mr. Sterling and begged him not to listen, promising him that she could fix this, that she could make me sign. Sterling stood up. He was a man who didn't get to be a billionaire by buying liabilities. He capped his pen. He put it back in his pocket. He looked at Elena and said simply that the deal was off. Then he looked at me. He nodded, just once, a gesture of respect from one power player to another, and walked out of the hall. That was the domino. The moment Sterling walked out, the illusion broke. The audience began to talk, a roar of whispers and shock. Phones were out. People were live streaming. The Queen of Botany was melting down on stage, screaming at her stepdaughter while the proof of her fraud loomed 20 feet high behind her. I didn't stay to watch her crumble. I didn't stay to hear her excuses or her pleading. I unplugged my USB drive. I took the piece of paper from my pocket, the original certified copy, and I walked down the stairs of the stage, right through the center aisle. Security didn't stop me. They stepped aside. The wealthy patrons in the aisle seats pulled their legs back to let me pass. I walked out of the grand hall into the cool night air of the city. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message waiting. It was from the operations manager at the greenhouse, a man named Old Man Miller who had been loyal to my mother. He asked if it was done. I typed back one word. Done. By the next morning, the gilded stem was in chaos. Investors were pulling out. Pre-orders were being canceled in the thousands. The board of directors, realizing that the company's flagship product was legally untouchable without me, voted to remove Elena as CEO by noon. She tried to call me. My phone showed 42 missed calls from her, then from her lawyer, then from her friends. I didn't answer a single one. I went to the greenhouse. It was quiet there. The humidity was high, the smell of earth grounding me. I walked through the rows of midnight crimsons. They were beautiful. Dark, almost black, with a scent like spiced wine. They were my mother's work, and they were my work. I didn't destroy the company. I didn't have to. Without the rights to the rose, the company was just a shell. 3 weeks later, I sat across from the interim board of directors. They looked tired. They offered me a settlement. They offered me money to just sign over the rights and go away. I pushed the contract back across the table. I told them I didn't want a payout. I told them I wanted the keys. I wanted the greenhouse. I wanted the land it sat on. I wanted the brand name dissolved, and I wanted full operational control transferred to a new entity under my name. They argued. They blustered. They told me I was inexperienced. They told me I didn't know how to run a business. I asked them how much inventory they had left that they could legally sell. Silence. They signed the papers an hour later. Elena lost the house. She lost the cars. It turns out she had leveraged everything she owned against the expectation of that $40 million sale. When the deal collapsed, the banks came for the rest. The last I heard, she was living with a distant cousin in Ohio, trying to start a lifestyle blog that no one reads. I renamed the company. It is called Vance Roots now. We don't do galas. We don't do awards. We grow things. I kept the old crew. I gave Miller a raise. And I spend my days exactly where I want to be, in the dirt, with the sun on my back, creating things that are real. Sometimes, when I'm grafting a new stem, I think about that moment on the stage. I think about the look on Elena's face when she realized that the person she treated as a tool was actually the architect of her entire world. There is a lesson there, I think. You can wear the crown, you can stand in the light, and you can take the credit. But if you don't own the roots, you're just a cut flower. And cut flowers always wilt. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever felt like the invisible person doing the real work, or if you just love seeing justice served cold, I would truly love for you to like this video and subscribe. It helps me share more stories like this one. Stay rooted, everyone.